How to make platformer game episode 2 play. So the first step that we're gonna need to do is we're gonna need to do some setup. So first of all, if you go to your sprites folder and then assets, main characters, and go to virtual guy. I like this one. You can pick Pigman, Ninja Frog, or Mask Dude, but I like this one. Anyway, select them all. And then type 16 pixels per unit. It just makes them a little bit bigger because currently, or at least they were a second ago, tiny. Now then, we're going to need to do some stuff in the project settings. So simply go into first of all preferences. We're going to have to first do this, and in this tab external tools, you're going to have to, in this external script editor, it will normally be this. You'll have to select VS Code. And then literally select every one of these, just so that you have important stuff like autocorrect, and will let the scripts automatically open when you open them. And currently we haven't done any scripts, but in a moment we are going to make some scripts. So first of all, create our player. Basically we're going to create a game object, right click, create empty, and then type player. And then we're going to add a component. A component kind of gives it more functionality. For example, you'll need to add a tile map collider 2D in your terrain game object, because otherwise nothing will happen and there won't be any collision. This will let us, this tile map collider 2D will make it so that anything else with a collider will just straight up hit into it, which is exactly what we want. So our first component in our player will be a sprite render. Just for the record, just as a reminder, everything is game object. Every little thing. Our grid is, our light is, our camera is, but so is our player, obviously. In our sprite render, there's currently no sprite. Let's just set light to fall for now. Next episode, we're going to make animations, but that's not for this episode. Anyways, if you want to toggle off all this grid and whatnot, then just press D. It's a handy shortcut that I found earlier. Anyways, next we're going to add a capsule collider. In case you're wondering why it's a capsule, it's because basically if you go on, let's say, a sharp edge, then you won't just bonk into it, you'll slide a little bit away, which is exactly what we want. Next, if you click this edit collider, and by the way, this is also a component. Components are basically just Unity built-in scripts to add functionality. In this case, it's a collider. Anyways, if you just edit this one, and the way that you do that is by clicking this to nice size, which in my case is like this. Then we are going to now add a rigid body to do. This will give the player gravity and also some more functionality like rotation. In this case, we do not want rotation, so go to constraints and freeze rotation on the z-axis, which makes it so that it can't rotate. Next, select the gravity scale and set it to 4. This will make the player fall pretty nicely. This is what I Anyway, set the sleeping mode to never sleep, collision affection to continuous, and interpolate edge to interpolate. This will make the Unity actually check if the player is colliding a lot more often, and this is exactly what we want. If it lags, then just set sleeping mode to start away. But if it doesn't later on, then just keep it at this. So better. Now we're going to add an edge collider, which is going to be what we're going to kind of check for, like on ground. We'll check if we're on the ground. And this time we're going to set it to is trigger, which means that it will only detect for colliders and won't actually won't actually be a collider. We'll just check for it. Anyways, next we're going to set the offset to negative 1.2. That way it's just below our player. And then we're going to set the points here, these are 2 points, to negative 0.25 and positive 0.25. This makes them quite small and lets the player know if they're collided with the ground and nothing else. Because if it was big, then it might have collided with a wall. But since it's so small, then we know it's just colliding with the ground. So now we can add our first script. So the first step to do this is just to do a little bit of folder structuring, create a new folder, and then call it script. In that folder, you can go here, create another folder, which you can call player. In that folder, we can finally create our script. So right click, create, and then model behavior script. This is basically a basic script template, which will always come with our script. So now then we're going to call this player movement, which is exactly what it will do. It will move our player. Because that wasn't clear enough. Anyways, now that that's finished compiling, we're just going to drag that onto our player, since it's technically a component. Now then, if you click this three dot menu, edit script, it should, after a little while, open up in Visual Studio Code. So anyways, there won't actually immediately be autocorrect, it should take around 30 seconds, but anyways, now then, this is actually a C# language, as you can see. I have a side ones in my IDE, which in my VS Code. Anyways, what we're going to do, basically, this gives it the functionality using Unity Engine, because without it, then let me just take this out. You'll see after a little while, after the bugs, after it actually registers everything, then it will work. But anyways, now the first what we're going to do is create a variable. Most people already know what a variable is, but if you don't, then it's just a thing that you can that might change. But in this case, it doesn't, because we're going to have a serialized field, which means that it will show in the inspector. Serialized field, and then we're going to create private. This means that no other script can access it, since we don't really need any other script to access it. This will be the only script with movement. So float, and then speed, and then we'll set this to, I found the great number would be 10, and then just semicolon to end up every line. Next, we're going to create some more serialized field variables. As you can see, autocorrect has come up, and then private float, which means that it can have its floating point value, which means that it can have obviously a decimal value, but if you set it to int, then it will only be whole numbers. Yeah. But personally, I think floats are better because the float gives you more leniency to change it. Anyways, what I found this good number was 20. Next, we're going to continue with this, and then, but we're not going to have a serialized field. Actually, we will have one more. This one will reference our rigid body so we can access its velocity. So we're going to create private, and then rigid body 2D, and then RB. Next, we're going to have some private board. The first one's going to be is grounded. The next one is going to be our move input. I'll explain what this does in a moment. Move input. And then this should be float. Sorry, I forgot to do that. Anyways, in our update loop, we're going to set move input to equal to input, which is just accessing Unity's input system, or at least the old one. The new one is very difficult, but you don't learn it right now. Get axes, and then raw, and then horizontal. Type it. Make sure that it is exactly like this, otherwise it will glitch. Let me explain what this does. So, if you go into Edit, and then Project Settings, next click on Input Manager, you'll see in Axes, horizontal, and then the name is this, which we can actually copy and paste just to be sure, and then the positive button is right, which means that that will give the value 1 if the right key is pressed, while the negative button is left. And this also works for A and D keys, which means that if any of those keys are down, then it will kind of set the move input to a value depending on what key is down. So if I go back into the script, this will basically get 1, -1, or 0. So what we can do is we can take our rigid body, Sorry, I am currently on capitals for some weird reason. RB. And then this is basically our reference. So whenever whenever we need to get something from the rigid body, we'll just type RB. And then we can type dot linear velocity x. And then we're just going to simply set that to move input times speed. And this will simply get this input and then multiply it by the speed, therefore setting the velocity to that value. AKA moving it, obviously. Why did I say AKA? Anyway, it moves it since the velocity is being set. Anyways, we're going to have to do quite a few things. So click on our player game object and you'll see this field for a rigid body 2D. Just drag in the rigid body 2D. And now, if we try it, then it actually should work. Movement, left and right at least. Anyways, as you can see, it works. Mine, for some reason, isn't quite working. It's probably because, I don't know. Anyways, let's just go into rigid body, and I, just in case, decided to start away, and that should maybe make it better. In my case, you can see I have a little bit of lag. Anyways, now, as you can see, if we click the A or D keys, then player mode, right or left. Perfect. Now, let's go back into our script, which should be right here. And then, next what we're going to do is we're going to implement jumping. This one will be a little bit more difficult. So what we're going to do is we're going to first have to check if we're on the ground, because the only way that a player can jump is if they're on the ground, unless they have double jumping, which we will actually implement later in this video. Anyways, type private and then void, not fixed update, on co, and then it should give you on collision enter. What you really need is on trigger, and then enter, and then 2D. And then instead of collision right here, type collider 2D, sorry, collider 2D, collision. Now then, we're just going to copy and paste this for another free functions. This one's going to be on trigger stay 2D. I believe it looks like this. And then the next is going to be on trigger exit 2D. And basically we're going to set this is grounded variable depending on what's happening. So first of all, at the start, we're going to set the default value to false. And in the on trigger enter 2D, we're going to set is grounded to true. So that means that it's hitting the floor. Since the trigger, the edge, is here, and if it's hitting into the floor, then we know that we're on the ground. So anyways, is grounded is equal to true. Same for here, is grounded is equal to true. And then here is grounded is equal to false, because that means that we're getting off it. And that means that we're, like, let's say jumping. And then is grounded is equal to false. This is a Boolean value, by the way, which means that it can only be yes or no, aka true or false. Next, I actually messed up a little bit. I think you need to actually take this move input and put it in not update, but something called fixed update. This is basically makes it so that depending on your frame, basically an update, it depends. It kind of makes it depend on your framing. So basically, let's say if you're on a 30 frames per second, then you'll be slower than if you're on 60 frames per second. But if we put in fixed update, then it will make up for that. Anyways, if you want, you can also move this in there. But in my case, I just want to keep it here. Anyways, in our update function, we are going to check if the button, if the jump button is down, which again is an axis kind of, but not exactly. But in my case, I want it to be more modular. So what I'm going to do is get key down, And then this key will be a key code. As you can see, key code dot, in my case, I like W. If you want space, then just type space, like that. But in my case, I personally, I prefer W for jumping. And is grounded, then just simply add, then simply set the linear velocity y. This is not right. Linear velocity y equal to jump force. Now, if we go back in, wait for it to compile, or whatever it's doing, I don't know. Anyways, and then we play. As you can see, we can jump once, but no more than once. That's exactly what we want. Anyways, if we go back into VS Code, we are now gonna implement two very important features. One is the jump buffer, which makes it so that if you let go mid-air, then the player will simply, I guess, the heavy gravity will be postponed, aka making them not go as far as if they held it. This gives the player more control. So if instead here we're gonna do input dot get key up dot get key up, and then it's the same key as before, W. Keycode.w, sorry. Keycode.w. Then all we're gonna do is why is this keycode.w? Let me just see what the glitch is. Oh, sorry. You're meant to get key up, not button up. Anyways, get key up, W. Then we are simply going to set rigid body dot linear velocity y equal to 0.5 multiplied by rb dot linear velocity dot y. This basically makes it so that basically the linear velocity is being set to half of what it was. Anyways, we also need to put an f in front of this, otherwise it will glitch. Anyways, if we save this, then this feature will actually legitimately just be done. Really, really simple and amazing feature. Anyways, if we play, then just simply tap W key to test it. You see? And then if I hold, then it goes bigger. And I can actually do this. Now I actually have so much functionality over it. The next thing we're going to do is have double jumping. And this is when it's going to be very, I guess, fun to make. And serialized field. And then this time we're going to have a private, and then an integer, amount of jumps. This is the amount of jumps that were allowed. So you can set this. So currently it's just going to be 1, so you can't actually double jump. But if you want it to be more, then you just set it to 2 for double jumping or anything like that. Anyways, what we're going to do is we're going to first instead, we're going to have if is grounded. Then we need to create a new variable now. This is going to be a private, and then another integer, current jump. This one will be changed. This is the current jump that you're on, and this will keep track of which jump that we're on, obviously. And then if is grounded, aka if is grounded is equal to true. All of these makes it so that it is true. But if we want if not is grounded, for example, then just simply put an exclamation. That's not, basically, exclamation. Anyways, in here, current jump is equal to 0. And instead of is grounded here, oh wait, we also need to do one last thing. We also have to check whether the linear velocity, rb.linear velocity y, is less than 0.01. Less than 0.01. 1. And this means that you're not actually jumping or anything. It's just confirmation. Makes it a lot better. Oh, sorry, I forgot to say, you also need to add and. I'm such an idiot. And here, if we check if instead of is grounded, we're going to check for current jump being less than the amount of jumps that we're allowed, then that means that the current jump is being increased, because that means that, well, we just jump. And I believe this should be it. This should just be what we want. Here. As a test, I am going to simply go into my player, set the amount of jumps. I said amount of jump. I'll fix that later. It should be fixed by the next video. Anyways, I'll set it to 2, and then see whether we can double jump. As you can see, it works, but if we set amount of jump to 1, then we can't, no matter how hard we try, we can't. Also, one last thing that I'd like to change is that I'm noticing that it's a bit floaty, so I'm going to set the gravity scale to 5. And I guess, bye guys!